today for hosting this important conversation. And before we go through the slides, I want to tell you a little bit about the Clean Slate Initiative itself. The Clean Slate Initiative is a national nonprofit organization that works with lawmakers, government agencies, and community partners to pass and implement laws that automatically clear eligible records for people who meet the requirements. We also work to expand clearance eligibility so more people have meaningful second chances. Clean Slate Initiative's vision is one where people will no longer be defined by their records and have the opportunity to contribute to their community and have fair opportunities to work, get an education, and achieve their full potential. Sean, can we go to the next slide? Now, it's not an exaggeration to say that the United States has a records crisis. There are more people in America today with an arrest or conviction record than there are people with four-year college degrees. 1 in 3 adults, 70 to 100 million people, have some kind of record, whether it's an arrest record or a conviction record. Most states have a process to clear these records, and the Clean Slate Initiative and our partners work to streamline the process to ensure that those who are eligible receive their second chance. However, there's no process right now to clear federal records, which is why it's important to start with some information about the Clean Slate Act of 2023. It's a bill that's currently before Congress. Go to the next slide. So here's an overview of some of the key provisions of the Clean Slate Act of 2023. It would provide automatic record sealing for simple possession and non-violent marijuana offenses. It would also apply automatic sealing for arrest records when the disposition ends in an acquittal, dismissal, or exoneration. It would also create the first ever petition process to seal federal records that are not automatically sealed. And implement a 2-year waiting period for repetitioning for record clearance if denied. Also, there are some provisions in there to ensure people who are indigent have adequate support through public defense and provide employers, protect employers from liability. Next slide. Now, when talking about convictions and record clearance, some people's minds gravitate to thinking about some very serious offenses. So it's important to talk about what the Clean Slate Act would not do. Now, the Clean Slate Act would not allow for sealing of sexual offense records, terrorism, treason, or national security records, or offenses when people have been convicted of other violent crimes. So with that quick overview of what a federal clean slate law would look like, let's talk a little bit about why record clearance is important for people and communities as it relates to educational opportunities. So currently, 72% of colleges and universities use background checks to screen applicants for arrest and conviction records. Often colleges have more leeway than employers when considering an applicant's record. Some students are excluded or denied admission. Some institutions delay considering prospective students until after enrollment ends or admission deadlines pass. And there are some financial aid limitations, although there have been improvements in recent years to expand eligibility for financial aid for people who have arrest or conviction records. Next slide. And I think we all know that college is just one pathway to education. Trade schools, as well as business and occupational licensure programs, present education-based opportunities for millions of people in America. According to the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences, there are over 42,000 legal or regulatory restrictions that limit opportunities for people who have a record. Those that limit access to trade schools or licensures are especially troubling because folks are denied hands-on training with shorter, often more affordable programs, opportunities to compete for highly demanded skilled trade jobs, opportunities for advancement within their careers, and these skilled trade jobs are in such demand that there's often immediate entry into the workforce that people cannot take advantage of if they're denied access to trade schools or licensing. It looks like some people in the chat are having trouble seeing the slides, so just flagging that and saying it out loud. Hopefully, it's not everyone. And um, so quickly, I want to talk about the broader impacts of that stem from these barriers. Um, first of all, okay, great. Our workforce is weakened, and there are some consequences for employment and career readiness, right? We also don't get the community or societal benefits. That's one of the key reasons why businesses are very strong supporters and instrumental advocates for clean slate policies, both on the state and federal levels. These policies are good for employers who can tap into a waiting workforce, and they're good for workers who experience increased opportunities and higher wages after record clearance. There's a stat on the slide, this is from a Michigan study, that found that people are 11% more likely to be employed, earn 22% higher wages on average 1 year after having received record clearance. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, can we go back one? I forgot to touch on the community and societal benefits. Thank you. So the community and societal benefits of record clearance, there are positive ripple effects for families and communities. So this extends well beyond the individuals. Record clearance also helps reduce recidivism rates and supporting reintegration. If folks have easier access to opportunities or more meaningful access to opportunities, it really helps drive recidivism, reduce the recidivism rates, which in turn enhance public safety. All right, we can go to the next slide. So just to wrap up here, I want to note that record clearance creates positive impacts for individuals and communities, and that includes access to educational opportunities. By removing barriers to education, we can strengthen the workforce by improving the career readiness of workers. And educational opportunities have the potential to disrupt negative generational impacts that are created by having a record. For folks looking for more information, resources, or opportunities to become engaged on Clean Slate issues, please visit our website, cleanslateinitiative.org/federal, has information about the Clean Slate Act of 2023. And I think that covers my portion of the intro conversation. So I'm going to hand it off to a great partner and ally, Sharon Dietrich from Community Legal Services, Pennsylvania. And well, Sharon, you take it from there. You know what to say.
Thank you, Dustin. Good afternoon from where I am. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but I'm happy to join this webinar today and have a chance to talk with you about the state experience of having a clean slate law. Next slide, please. I guess I should introduce myself a little bit. I have been a legal aid lawyer working on employment law issues for low-income people for 35 plus years in the office in Philadelphia. And our work in the employment arena over those years has become more and more tilted towards helping people with criminal record barriers. And I think of our practice as being somewhat of a laboratory because essentially people tell us what they need and we try to help them with that. So we did not go out looking to create a practice to help people with criminal records. People with criminal records in Philadelphia and beyond told us that they needed that representation. So what we try to do at Community Legal Services is essentially we represent a large volume of individuals in our community with civil legal problems, and we try to lift up their experiences and the models that we come up with to a state and national level. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense of the type of the work that we do, as I may have mentioned, I've been with Community Legal Services for 30 years, 35 years. This work goes back at least 35 years. I think it goes back fairly close to when I started. I still remember the first time somebody at a community education event said to me, hello, I have a criminal record and it's keeping me from getting a job. And as an employment lawyer, it kind of blew my mind because I had never had anyone present that issue to me before back there in the late 1980s. And there was really no practice for individuals with criminal records in employment law at that time. And so over the course of that 30 years, we have developed a practice. And I suppose I should have put in part of the slide about how we help individuals. So I'll quickly talk about that a bit. We help people who have been turned down for records that are not related to their ability to work. We help people get occupational licenses. We help them when the background screeners make errors in their records. Um, we do a lot of record clearing, which is mostly what I'm going to talk about today. And so basically anything that deals with employment, we have come up with strategies. Oh, another thing I should mention, often there are laws in our state of Pennsylvania that have prevented people with criminal records from working in certain occupations, and we've filed legal challenges to curtail those laws. So those are the sorts of things that we do for individuals. But as I said, we try to raise up our work and our work with people with records who we know very well from representing so many for so long. And some examples of the national work we've done in this area include the following. So EEOC has a guidance on criminal records and employment about when employers can and cannot uh, tell people with records that they will not be offered a job. If you have not seen this guidance, I strongly advise you to take a look at it because not only is it a good lay of the land for what Title VII, the race discrimination law, says about having a criminal record, but it's also a wealth of information about resources connected to race discrimination, criminal records, and employment. So we were among the earliest to ask that a guidance that EEOC had put out when Clarence Thomas, now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, had been the chair of EEOC back in the early 1980s. We asked that that be updated, and eventually during the Obama administration, it was. We also have done national class action lawsuits against background screeners who just don't get it right. They are required to comply with a law called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. They often, unfortunately, do not. So we've been very active in litigation in that area. And then finally, maybe our contribution with the most long-lived uh, experience is going to be our development of the clean slate model, where basically what clean slate is, and I'll talk a little bit about more on this in a minute. Criminal cases by clean slate are sealed by automation rather than individuals filing petitions. So it's easy for me to say, harnessing the power of computers to clear records at scale, which was our goal in developing this model. Next slide, please. Oh, I think that's going in the wrong direction. And one more. Okay. So of the many things that we do at CLS, the thing that our clients most want when they come into our office is that they want to clear their records. They're not usually there saying, this employer fired me or wouldn't hire me. I want my job back. I want that job. Sometimes they do. But really what almost a super majority of our clients want is they want their records not to be a continued barrier to the many aspects of their lives that criminal records tend to affect. And the good thing about record clearing is that it often can help with all of these problems. It helps with employment, helps with housing, helps with education. And so that's why eventually it became the area in which we provide most of our services to people with criminal records. Now, I will say, having said that this is what people want, not always can they get what they want because eligibility is developed by state law. And there are typically limitations about which offenses will be able to be expunged or sealed how long they have to wait before they can apply for expungement or sealing. And just to describe those two terms quickly, they mean different things in different states. I'll tell you what they mean in Pennsylvania, but be aware that your state, what we call sealing, you may call expungement. What we call expungement is basically the complete destruction of a criminal case. The file gets destroyed, the data gets taken out of the database. And sealing does not involve that, but it hides the case from the public so that an employer generally will not see it. But it remains there for use by certain entities that are allowed by law to use it, most oftenly law enforcement. So a criminal case that might be sealed because it's 10 years old may not be available to an employer, but it may be available to a district attorney if that person gets in trouble again. Now, generally, record clearing is done by what we call a petition process, where one by one, a person gets a lawyer, files a petition, goes to court, has a hearing in front of a judge, paper gets pushed around, very slow and very expensive and not very effective for helping as many people as you'd like to see helped. Next slide, please. So we had this idea that we called Clean Slate. And as I've said, that idea is basically to use computers to clear cases instead of court petitions. So the way it works is that an algorithm is created by, in our case, the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts. That algorithm identifies cases that are eligible to be cleared under state law. Orders are then produced for those cases, court orders that are approved in each county by the judges in like a kind of a mass fashion. And then another algorithm actually does the work of clearing out that case, making it not available to the public at that point. So all computer algorithms applying eligibility criteria. So that was the idea that we put in front of the Pennsylvania legislature in, I believe 2016 was the first year we went there with this idea. And no state had ever done it at this point. And I was kind of surprised that people didn't broadly think we were crazy, but they did not. And in fact, the concept of it enjoyed a lot of support from both Republicans and Democrats, and from the right and the left. We had supporters from both sides of the political spectrum that strongly supported the legislation. And I think part of it was about not only giving people a second chance, but making government more effective. So given that this process could be implemented without a lot of cost and without a whole lot of fuss, people liked the idea that it actually was going to help people who were eligible to get their records cleared, get them cleared. Because otherwise, a very small percentage of people who are eligible actually get that to happen. So we had our bipartisan sponsors. A really pivotal point of our campaign was a day that members of the Philadelphia Eagles, who were about to win the Super Bowl that year, came to Harrisburg to lobby in support of the bill as a racial justice initiative because of this disparate number of Blacks and Hispanics that have criminal records. And we passed the Pennsylvania legislature in 2018 and haven't looked backwards since. Next slide, please. We've upgraded our bill twice. I will tell you that Pennsylvania does not have the strongest eligibility criteria. And so even though there was a lot of support for the method of clearing records, there was some leeriness about how broadly we would allow records to be cleared. What would the eligibility criteria be? So at first, we only sealed misdemeanors after 10 years and some other things, lesser things that I'll talk about in a minute. And one of the things that kept our bill from being as supportive as it might have been in the first go round was that there was a requirement that all your court fines and costs be paid in order for your case to be sealed. That suppressed the number of people who benefited, and the legislature was duly taken aback by that. And so 2020, in the height of the pandemic, they removed the requirement that court fines and costs had to be paid. Now, if you owe restitution, your case still won't be sealed until it's paid. But in Pennsylvania, a relatively small percentage of cases have restitution. So lots of people who do owe court fines and costs are being able to get their record cleared. And then just this past December, we did expand the eligibility criteria for inclusion of some felonies, which we had not had in Pennsylvania up to that time. Next slide, please. So overall, these are currently our standards in Pennsylvania. If you have a drug felony or a lot of property felonies, such as theft, fraud, welfare fraud, those are eligible to be sealed after you've gone 10 years without conviction of another misdemeanor or felony. For misdemeanors, currently the time frame is 7 years. And for summary offenses, which are below the level of misdemeanors, they can be sealed in 5 years. Non-convictions are sealed after about 3 months from when the case is over. And that is done even within a case. So let's say that you were found guilty on a simple assault charge, but not guilty on an aggravated assault charge. That aggravated assault charge would be sealed and not available to the public, even though the simple assault charge as a conviction would remain. All right, next slide, please. Does it work? Yes, it does. So I think the most telling piece of data about all of this is that since Clean Slate went into effect in Pennsylvania in 2019, we have sealed over 45 million criminal cases in whole or in part so far. And that's while we haven't even yet really started to seal the new 2023 law in any large measure. So that number is only going to continue to climb. Now, think about that, 45 million cases. My view is that that is probably as many cases as have been sealed in the United States, in all states since the beginning of the country, because you just can't do that by pushing paper around. But using the power of automation, we can get those results at scale so that most people who are eligible are getting their records sealed. And does, having your record sealed matter? Yes, of course it does. To tell you about a client who recently was helped by sealing, a client of mine, he was actually a plaintiff in a lawsuit that we have that's challenging a state statute that says that you can't work as a private security guard if you have certain things on your record. He had his case sealed, and the security agency that would not give him a job previously then gave him a job, and his earnings increased substantially. So that's just one story, but that'll give you a sense of how powerful this remedy can be. Next slide. And that's to say this is the end. I look forward to hearing questions at the end. And I will, at this point, turn things over to Chidi Umez Rowley to tell you about what her organization does with respect to clearing records. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And thanks to the Department of Education for the invitation to share the resources available through the Clean Slate Clearinghouse. Hello, everyone. As Sharon said, I am Chidi Umez Rowley, and I'm with the Council of State Governments Justice Center, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that provides research, data, resources, and criminal justice solutions to all branches of government and to the field at large. Next slide. The Justice Center currently operates the National Reentry Resource Center, or the NRRC. And while our primary role through the NRRC is to deliver training and technical assistance to Second Chance Act grant recipients across different tracks, including grantee programs working to improve education and employment outcomes, The NRC also provides the services described here on the slide, including promoting what works in reentry and providing information for people returning to communities from incarceration. Next slide. Some other key features of the NRC includes resources in reentry, a National Criminal Justice Initiatives map, and directories for state and local reentry services across the country. Next slide. So particularly today, what brought me here for this presentation is to talk about the Clean Slate Clearinghouse, which is a resource that lies within the NRC and is a project that represents a continued commitment from the U.S. Department of Justice and Department of Labor to improve employment and education outcomes for people with criminal records. The key attributes of the clearinghouse are to provide people with criminal records and non-legal practitioners with plain language record clearance information. Record clearance in this context, as Sharon was describing, can look different or have different names in different localities and jurisdictions, but mostly referring to sealing and expungement policies, and in some cases destruction, as Sharon was describing, that happens in Pennsylvania, and that might be a term that's used for the state. Another attribute of the clearinghouse is to support legal service providers with tools and resources they need in their service delivery. And then the clearinghouse is also helps to give policymakers and national organizations a way to compare state policies across the country. Next slide. And so the clearinghouse, the tool itself, the website is designed, as I mentioned, for different audiences who are seeking more information regarding criminal record clearance policies across the country. And so there are essentially three ways to enter the site by answering one of the three prompts you see here on the screen. And so the first prompt will allow you to see an overview of adult and juvenile record clearance policies across the country. The second prompt is the way to enter the site through a legal service provider database, which is a catalog of legal service providers who have indicated that they do handle record clearance cases at little to no cost to clients. And then the third portal, the third prompt, provides a map that allows for the ability to do a multi-state policy comparison, which is helpful as people are thinking about relocating across state lines and trying to figure out what are the record clearance policies and how across states and how will that impact their ability to access education and employment opportunities as well. And so the next couple of slides that I will share will show some examples of the primary pages once you pick one of these portals and once you answer one of these prompts. And so I'll share some of the information that you'll be able to see. So the first one here is an example of an adult record clearance policy and criteria for record clearance relief from the state of Oklahoma. I do realize the text is very small, but I just wanted to focus on highlighting the types of information that is available on the clearinghouse. And so on the policy overview page, you can get a plain language description, as I mentioned, of record clearance policies that affect conviction cases, diversion or deferral cases, or cases that did not result in a conviction, but that there was an arrest. And so what you'll see the availability and the process for record clearance in the state based on the case type, the differences between felony and misdemeanor cases, and the particular waiting periods for record clearance in that state. On this page, if you toggle through the page, you can also see the policies as they are written in state statutes. So for those who are interested in seeing the statutory language, that is also available on this page as well. And then on some of these record clearance overview pages as well, where the information is available, it will note the impact of having your record cleared, how that will impact any employment, licensing, and in some cases, educational opportunities as well. Also want to note that although this is an example of an adult case overview, the site also includes juvenile record clearance policies across states as well. Another note is we are currently working on updates. So if you do go to the site and you see some things information that may be out of date, we are working to make sure that information is up to date for the current legislative cycle as well. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, the second portal will get you into legal service provider pages, here highlighting Colorado and the legal assistance that is available in the state based on our ability to curate and call and get in contact with legal service providers, as I mentioned, who have indicated that they do provide record clearance services at little to no cost to clients. And then some in states or jurisdictions that don't have that information available, we link to a bar association that might be in the area as well. And so where available, you can see the name, phone number, and service area for the provider. And also, in the service area for the provider. Next slide. The compare state page, which is the last portal, once you answer that prompt, if that is what you would like to, how you would like to experience the website, this page pulls all the information that that is curated on the site around record clearance policies in each state. And then it allows you to do a side-by-side comparison. So for example, if you want to compare the process for record clearance for an adult conviction case in Oklahoma and a similar case in Colorado, this page allows you to see how the states treat record clearance for this specific type of case. Including whether it is automatic or it's a petition-based process, the waiting periods for each state and how the state treats that process for felony or misdemeanor, whether it's a felony or misdemeanor case. And then other requirements, as mentioned, and you can see here some of the categories that you can use to compare the states. Any other requirements for each state, this page allows you to do that side-by-side comparison. Again, this is helpful as we talk about policymakers and thinking about how their state compares to other states or a neighboring state, national organizations who want to include some of that data in a report or use that information again for state-based reporting. Or things like that as well. This page is designed for that. Next slide. All right. And then finally, included in the Clean Slate Clearinghouse are general and state-specific resources, including court forms necessary for self-representation, links to state court websites such as this one from Utah, and other publications. We have webinars on the site, toolkits from various organizations who are involved in this work, and other resources around record clearance, sealing, expungement, other relief from criminal record, information about record clearance fairs, things that are happening locally in certain jurisdictions. All of that information is available on the Clean Slate Clearinghouse. Next slide. And so that was a very quick overview of the Clean Slate Clearinghouse as a resource. And so all of the information that Sharon shared specifically to Pennsylvania, you can find that similar information on the Clean Slate Clearinghouse regarding states across the country. And then if there are any other questions around this resource, please feel free to contact me directly or next slide. You can also reach out to the NRRC, the National Reentry Resource Center, through the information that you see here on the screen, subscribing to the website, or reaching out directly through the help email that is provided here. And so thank you very much. With that, I will pass it back to Sean.
All right, thank you, Chi. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing this information, talking kind of all the different work that your organizations are doing to help people with criminal justice involvement of sort of any sort. So for participants, please use the chat if you have any questions. We had a couple come in that I'm going to throw out to the group, and then folks can answer it however whoever would like to answer it can. The first question was around terminology. What's the accurate way to answer the question? If your case has been sealed, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime? So you're applying for, I'm assuming, I'm reading into this a little bit, you're applying for a job, you're filling out an application, your case has been sealed. Have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime?
The answer to that is going to depend in part on your state law and whether the state allows you to say, no, I have not. And I believe maybe one of my co-panelists can speak to this more authoritatively than I can, but I believe most states allow you to answer the question no, because what is the point otherwise of having your record sealed, right? So our law in Pennsylvania specifically says that you can answer the question no.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. For most states, it is no, because Sharon, as you mentioned, what is the point? The problem comes in what you described about background checks and the information that appears there. So although the person will indicate no, the employer still has the opportunity to run background checks or whatever opportunity they're seeking, there's still that availability, and removal of that information sometimes doesn't catch up to some of the background checking systems. And so that's where that creates some challenges there.
And typically, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Typically, if a private background screener is providing information about a sealed case, they may have some legal liability for doing that. And also you can challenge the results of that report by whatever that background screener provides as a way of sort of an appeal process, an internal appeal process, which you probably want to do. But know that it's their obligation to keep their records up to date as they can. So if they happen to have, loose information around from 5 years ago that said you have a conviction for simple assault, the case has now been sealed, their obligation is to fix that. So as Chidi says, it is not uncommon that they get it wrong and they report the case, but there are actions you can take to try to hold them responsible.
And thank you, that's super helpful. And that reminds me of just another aspect of public awareness that needs to be included with these laws, because aside from the inaccurate reporting provided by some background check providers, oftentimes if people are not aware that their records have been cleared or going through the expungement process, people can often engage in self-disclosure unnecessarily and kind of remove themselves from that applicant pool. So just making sure that people and the public are aware about what these laws are, what they mean for them, and how to make sure that they can make the most of their second chance.
That if I may actually ask a question around that about public information, and Sharon, if you can share how that happened in Pennsylvania around just awareness, public awareness. Was there a campaign? How was that built into the reform itself?
So one of the challenges of the clean slate model is that it's really next to impossible to directly inform a person that their record is being cleared when you're clearing 45 million cases, because just think of the expense of that, the challenges to actually reach the person who had their case years ago. So we have at Community Legal Services tried a number of different things, two of which I'll highlight. The first is public education about the Clean Slate Law. And that means a lot of press, social media, expungement clinics, things of that nature to try to reach the public and let them know there is this new law that may help you. Look into your own case. Go to the court, see if your records are sealed, or order your record from the state police, see if anything comes up. So we have done things like press conferences with the governor. We did one with the governor of Pennsylvania just a month ago to get the word out about our state clean slate law. And in fact, when people were recently studied about if they knew about clean slate and how they found out, most of them said they found out through those public outreach efforts, through the media. The second thing that we've done, and we're very excited about this, is that we have a screening tool that allows people to check what is publicly showing on their record. So basically, you put in your name, your date of birth, and a few other things, and you will get an email back saying what is publicly showing on your record at this point. Are there things that can be sealed in the future or now? And will that be done by the automation, or do you need a lawyer to file a petition? Because there still are some things that are not eligible for the automated process, but you still can file a court petition. They tend to be offenses that are on the more serious side that the legislature was not prepared to give automated sealing to. So if you go to our website where that screener resides, mycleanslatepa.com, mycleanslatepa.com. You'll see the screener, and that is the kind of individualized response you get. We only unveiled that in the last month, and it's already had very solid take-up.
That's great. Dustin, this question I think is maybe more geared towards you, but I invite other panelists to participate. What are the current/future efforts for federal expungement policies? I know you touched on this, but
yeah, HR 2930 has been introduced in Congress on the House side, and I think that there are efforts among coalition partners at the national level, a lot of business leaders, community groups, and other things continuing to advocate to push for the first ever process for sealing federal records. So that process is in motion. And like one thing that's really worth mentioning is the work done in Pennsylvania with Sharon and partners there was really instrumental because it set a precedent of bipartisanism, right? And so when we're talking about changing laws, it's inherently a political process. The good thing about Clean Slate is that from the very beginning, it was bipartisan, right? And that's the true, and that is also true when it comes to our federal efforts. So if you go on Congress's website, look up the Clean Slate Act of 2023, you'll see it has strong support from Republicans and Democrats. And again, that's just been a key to the success of these policies since 2018.
There's another question here about what can communities and nonprofit organizations do to support Clean Slate in Pennsylvania? And I guess I would expand that kind of what can people do in states that maybe are not yet at that Pennsylvania level?
Well, right now in Pennsylvania, we are focused at getting the word out about the new law, the 2023 law, and the expansion to felonies in particular. Drug felonies in particular are one of the most common types of convictions that Pennsylvanians pick up. And so if you're interested in connecting with community clinics, Legal Aid around the state is working on doing community clinics. So we'd be happy to connect up with you. And actually, if you want to know about what clinics are going on in your state, if you go to the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, plan.org website, you can find a list of clinics that are currently scheduled in Pennsylvania. So I think connecting with outreach might be the thing that would be most supportive in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure Dustin can speak to supporting campaigns to get these laws passed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just fairly widely understood and recognized that these laws don't pass themselves, right? It takes momentum, it takes political will, and it takes a demand from the public. So the way that the Clean Slate Initiative approaches working in states is by working with a broad group of stakeholders. That's everyone from lawmakers and government agency officials to community partners and organizations that are focused on reform efforts generally, but also ones that work together and coordinate efforts to support the advancement of clean slate laws. So I think the best way for folks to identify or to, I guess, kind of take a look at what opportunities there may be in their state, either as an individual or as an organization looking to participate in the Clean Slate Coalition, go to cleanslateinitiative.org. There is a contact us form that gets routed to the appropriate staff member on our team. And there's also at cleanslateinitiative.org/states more information about the states that have passed the laws and links to some of the state coalitions that are currently either working to implement laws or advocating for these policies to be adopted.
There's an interesting question here in the chat. For Sharon, I'm also kind of interested to hear what other folks have to say. What has been the response of law enforcement agencies to this program in Philadelphia? How do you answer to the detractors that expunging is, I think, at an appropriate level and good quality control is being used during expungement?
As to the first part of that question, law enforcement has actually been supportive of the Pennsylvania Clean Slate Law, including the most recent expansion to felonies. And honestly, I don't know that these bills would have been passed without their support. The police themselves have not been very active, pro or con, in those legislative campaigns, but the Pennsylvania DA's Association have been strong supporters of Clean Slate. And they would tell you that the reason is that they understand that there is a public safety component to having people not remain forever second-class citizens because of their records. Now, part of the reason, and I'm being completely honest, that they can be supporters is that they continue to get access to these records. So from their perspective, great that the public doesn't have them, but we need it to do our jobs. And I think that has been the case in many of the states that pass Clean Slate, that law enforcement does continue to get access to the records. So is there a cop here and there that might not like it? Probably. But institutionally, there's been nothing but support in Pennsylvania. In response to the second question, I'm not completely sure that I understand it, but let me try to answer. Is there quality control? Yes, the courts, Clean Slate is administered in Pennsylvania by the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts and the Pennsylvania State Police. They tested the heck out of this system before it went live, and that includes with implementing the new law that has just gone into effect. And situations in which there have been erroneous taking offline cases that should not have been taken offline are almost non-existent. I just heard that one of the top administrators of the Pennsylvania courts say that. I've never seen it, that where a case has been inappropriately sealed. Sometimes it happens to the opposite, that a case that should be sealed is not sealed for some reason. And honestly, those cases are relatively rare. Most cases that should be sealed are sealed. I get the idea that the courts and the state police do not want to erroneously seal stuff that should be in the public. And so their view is they err a little bit on the side of making sure that a case needs to be sealed. And the person then still has the opportunity to file a petition. They don't have to rely on the Clean Slate law to seal their petition, their case. So at least in Pennsylvania, the quality control is seen as being very, very good.
And I just wanted to add, Sharon, just going back to that top part where you mentioned that in most states, law enforcement still has access to those records. And that's true from what we've seen as well. And not only law enforcement, but also in some cases, licensing boards for those who are seeking professional licenses. Some cases, even sealed or expunged records are still available. That's written in the carve out for the state policy. And so what we try to do is work with the licensing boards on how they treat a sealed or expunged case in their review, right? In the review of the applicant's licensing application, how would you treat and talk to them about their process of treating these records? Even though they have access to it, is that prudent? Is that is the relationship there for what they see as far as what the crime is to the license that the person is applying for, to the job that they're applying for? And so that's some of the work we do there. So I just wanted to touch on that regarding the access issue after sealing or expungement.
And Chidi's right, there's a mixed bag there. Some states consider those cases still, others do not. In Pennsylvania, our licensing board is not permitted to consider an expunged or sealed case.
All right. Well, just being mindful of time here, it is 2:29. I want to thank our presenters for their time, for their expertise. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who participated. Apologies that our presenter from the Chamber of Commerce could not make it. She fell ill, so was not able to attend. But we're very excited for this first webinar in our professional learning series and excited for many more. A lot happens after someone receives an education or continues their education while incarcerated or after release from incarceration or justice system involvement. And I think just hearing from our presenters today, we heard just how important things like Clean Slate are when it comes to people reintegrating in society, of continuing their lives and improving their lives, their community, their family. It's just, it's inspiring to hear about the work being done to help people get better. So thank you all. You may reach out to my colleague, Shereen Donaldson, at this email address. I can also drop it in the chat if you have questions. But thank you again, everyone, for the time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.